We'll be watching a first round game between zyxon of Sweden and variants only from Finland. Neither player has played a match yet. As you can see, the tournament has just started. Karhask got off with a 9-1 victory versus Bagzilla and is the favorite to take the top spot. That's getting the chance to play the reigning world champion Yasugi of Canada. Another player that got a really good start is Opperwezen from the Netherlands. The former world champion who has beaten Dog Answer and Mariotten with 8-2 and 9-1 respectively. So today is zyxon versus variants only. Two very experienced players. zyxon doesn't play very much Crazy House, but he's an original gangster Bug House player who even played when I used to play Bug House. And zyxon is a tiny rating favorite. Both players are above 2,600, so they are really strong. And the action is about to start, I think. Let's see if they have started to play. Variants only playing white in the first game versus zyxon. As you can see, they have only played 3 times before. The zyxon is up 2-1. Very exciting match. They will play 10 games regardless of the outcome, and 5-5 is an okay result. So no sudden death or something in case of 5-5. Let's see if we have any viewers. Actually we do. Welcome. So my prediction is it's going to be a very close match. Either player could take this. And we're off. Variants only, starting with e4. zyxon not a very strong theoretical player, just trying to get a decent position out of the opening. And you will probably see zyxon spending slightly more time in the opening. Shout out to my students from Grillska gymnasiet in Västerås. So this is a theoretical line. White giving the queen for a very, very strong initiative. And this should still be theory, I think. Let's see who is the better prepared player. I wonder what happens if black simply takes on f3. Does white have some sort of forced win then? There are a lot of nasty checks. Check here with the queen, check here, followed by maybe knight g7 check. I'm not sure. Taking on f3 would set up potential mating threat for black though, so white had better have something forced here. And it looks like variants only is prepared for this. As I mentioned, a lot of knight checks here. This could very well be a forced winning line for white. It sure looks like variants only has this prepared. Is it possible to run towards the queen side? So I'm not sure what is white doing here. Aren't the checks just... Okay, I see. He will sacrifice the queen on d8 and then put a heavy on c8 and then keep on checking. So the question is, black doesn't have much of an option here. Just play the forced moves and pray, but I'm afraid this is just over now. Well, black has to take on d7. And if you go back, the queen takes on e6. And now there's a forced mate indeed. Great preparation by variants only. I think we will see that opening variation again for black. So variants only playing an aggressive pawn sacrifice here in the opening. And that sent zyxon thinking. The idea behind putting the pawn on h3 is of course to weaken the white king side. And since black doesn't have a blocker, white goes on the offensive here, threatening to take on f7. Yeah, I wonder here, what if black just starts attacking the light pieces for white? Because black would really like to take here and then maybe at some point play knight at f3 check. Yeah. Thanks for your nice comments. So very sharp line here. But this knight is hanging. And it looks dangerous for white to drop the knight in case of... Yeah, so he protects e5. But still taking here and then maybe even giving the queen. How is that? I was thinking taking here, rook g1, queen takes e5, pawn takes, and knight here. Because the king can escape and pick up the bishop on f7 maybe. Or maybe I'm just delirious. I'm not sure. What about queen takes e5 here? Probably it's too dangerous. Because white will sacrifice here and then he has an extra knight also. Yeah, it just looks bad for black. Instead he tries to give the pawn for the knight on e5. So this is a very, very critical position. Yeah, I got a comment here from the chat that black seems way better. Black sure seems very, very active here. A lot of white pieces hanging. And a lot of holes everywhere. So black decides to go for that sacrifice. White quickly retreating with the bishop so it won't be hanging on f7, and simultaneously defending some important light squares around the king. And obviously black has to be careful here, so a queen won't land on f7. Yeah, this was a great defensive resource. And I'm wondering here, white suddenly got a huge initiative, trying to lure the black king further out on the board, picking up e5. Looks super dangerous. The question is, do you take with this pawn or this pawn? Maybe it's better to take with the f pawn, because the d pawn is covering c5. And now it's really close to mate. Simply pawn d6. Black will have to give his bishop, and it's over here, I think. Looks like white is winning this. I don't see a defense for black, because if you go out to b6, queen c7 is mate immediately. And this is probably also over. What about knight b7, followed by a queen check here, and follow the king over here and mating him. So black needs to run this way. Then you will pick up the bishop on e6 with check also. Oh, this is just forced mate. Yeah, queen c7 mate. Okay, so 1-1, very exciting start and a lot of opening discussions here. Let's see what zyxon has as his plan B. So he plays a different opening here. Maybe. Another topical line. And zyxon is trying to decide where to put the bishop, maybe. Does he put it outside the pawn chain? Or does he play something more passive, like e6 or whatever? Possibly bishop d7, maybe. Okay, so he settles for bishop d7 instead. White harassing the black strong knight on e4. And if black takes on c3, white simply strengthens the center, getting a semi-open b5 for the rook. There's an important tactical finesse here you have to look out for as white. Black could, if he gets the chance, take on e5, and if white takes with check on d7, you'd simply retreat with the knight, gaining a pawn. But of course, white knows this. This is an interesting move for black. Instead of trying to mend the dark squares, he just abandons them and goes on the attack with a queen, trying to capture either a bishop or a pawn. Very interesting, setting some problems for white. And that was actually a very important pawn, I think. I wonder how the queen trade is. Because you can, yeah, just put a bishop here, taking on d2. I suppose the idea for white is to take on c6 at some point and threatening mate on e7. But, I mean, if you take here on d2 now, yeah, and even just going for the mate at once. There's no smothered mate because the bishop is covering f2. But black tries to get rid of the bishop. A very important defender. And also covering e7, so there's no mating threat right now. And now maybe just... Do you take on e5 or... Oh, he took the free knight, and it looks like black is okay here in the defense. You need to be careful here, and this knight covers both e7 and g7, and very importantly attacks the bishop on g3. So now there are things like taking on g3, and if the pawn takes, you can even go queen at g1, rook takes, knight takes here, and put another knight on g4, and it's actually checkmate. So for instance, white has no time to take on c6. Or put a pawn on g7 or e7. Black is threatening mate here. Although he doesn't have a diag for g2 here. But now he has a diag. So simply white will need to put a knight on g2 in order to not give black the... But this looks like it's just over. The white king will have to try to escape here, but the knight goes to d4 then. This is surely a mating net. Check here with the knight, king takes, queen here. Of course the queen is buried though, which is annoying. So instead black just picks up a rook for free. No real threats for white. Very nicely conducted attack for black here. And too many threats. And no counter chances for white. There's a mating one on g2. There's also knight checks coming here. f3, maybe g4 at some point. Last desperate attacking attempt. Although it's not without poison, because if you go the king this way, this rook is actually pointing towards b7. But now white will run out of checks. No more diags in hand. Maybe black doesn't have a knockout blow here, but look at all those pieces. Yeah, I can even waste a queen on g2, bringing the king out, and this knight check perfectly blocks all the exits. No way down here. And it's 2-1 to zyxon. Very impressive play. Very impressive indeed. And they repeat the pawn sacrifice line. Looked like black was doing more than okay out of the opening, so I'm expecting maybe zyxon to deviate. Yeah. When you keep the knight at home here, a pawn on h3 is not as dangerous. But this is a very passive setup for white. I'm sure black has enough compensation here, but maybe not more than just compensation for the pawn he sacrificed. And this is what zyxon is aiming for. Yes, I do know zyxon personally. We won the Swedish Bughouse over the board championship here in August, and I've known him for many years. We played at Fix 25 years ago. That's where we started playing online. But unlike me, zyxon has always kept on playing. His fixed handle is Firefly, and he's, as I said, he's an OG Bughouse player. Yeah, I will stay up all night making that Kahoot for you guys. Nice to see you here. Yeah, Firefly is obviously a very strong Bughouse player. And Bughouse and Crazy House, they are closely related. He has a great feeling for the game, so even if he's not, his openings are not top notch, he's doing just fine. And now I suspect we will see a queen sacrifice here, clearing the e3 square, but looks like white can dance around with his king a little bit, and I suspect that white is better here. Yeah, I know. I know the Russians call it Swedish chess. So the pawn drop on f2 was just to make sure that you could take with check, and black was hoping to pick up the knight here for free, but instead white sacrifices his queen. And interesting play here by both players. It's not quite enough for black to throw everything at white, because this knight covers some important defensive squares. And I should say that Sweden was actually a superpower at Bughouse way back in the day. But not anymore. So what would really like to pick up this bishop, but after all the trades, there will come another diag here on g4. I wonder why he didn't just take on g5 though. Oh well. White is ahead on material here, so black really needs to get an attack going. Otherwise, white will just put his pieces on the board and dominate and win this game. So there's a mating threat on e1. Obviously it's easy to defend against that. The could, for instance, go back with a knight. But you could also perhaps put a bishop on d2 or simply take on f2. Although this knight is a bit annoying, threatening to take here. And I don't quite see an attack for white here. This is the obvious attacking move. But winning a rook doesn't really mean much. And black doesn't spend any time here. He doesn't care about material. He's out for... he wants blood. He wants to mate. If white had had another pocket knight, he could have taken here and then knight at e7 check, but he doesn't have it. And now it looks like isn't black just... Oh, king g1. The knight is covering f2. So black can take the annoying pawn on e7, but then white is obviously ahead in material by a lot. Maybe a pawn on h6. Yeah, pawn h6 would have been really strong, I think. Still very strong, pawn h6. Because if black takes here, just put a pawn on g7 and this looks very, very, very dangerous. If the king takes, you have knight h5. Black is on the ropes here. Yeah, possibly just... yeah, I can take the rook now if you want to. Yeah, that's a forced mate, yeah. Super strong play by Zyxon there, 3-1. And I think Zyxon has proven that once he gets out of the opening with a decent position, he's the stronger player. Zyxon tries yet another opening. I used to call this not the stone wall but the rubber wall when I was playing Bug House. It's a very flexible defense, and this line for white surely isn't the strongest. White just trying to get a position here. In fact, you could probably call black opening a success already. Looks like we're out of the book, which is good for Zyxon and not as good for variants only. I'm not sure why black decided to take with the bishop on d6. Looked more natural maybe to take with the pawn. Usually bishops are slightly stronger than knights because bishops are more versatile than knights. Bishops are very good defenders and decent attackers also, whereas the knights are more attacking pieces and rather poor defenders. So, do we have any viewers? Quite a few viewers. Great to see. Hello everybody. Zyxon thinking a lot here. And he opens the center. Looks like white is a bit ahead in development here. So white needs to find something here, or else black will just put a bishop on c6 and dominate the board. White will need to find something here, some weakness. Is it pawn here, or... This knight is doing such a great job defending h6 and f6. And this is a super strong threat. Bishop c6. Okay, so white attacks g7. This is the automatic defense. Sometimes the rook will become useful on the g file. I'm wondering, could he put the pawn on f6 instead? Once again, bishop at c6 is a strong threat. Maybe not as strong as I thought, but... So white has sacrificed 2 pawns, but he has a lot of board control and open lines, and black is passive here. Yeah, what does... Okay, so he decides to put the bishop here rather than on c6. Opervision had an interesting queen sacrifice in mind here. Yeah. So black plays a slightly different version here. What about taking here and maybe queen c7? Okay, so the bishop steps out of the way, the rook covers d8. Another threat on d8, queen at d8 coming, unless black can find a way to keep defending that square. Yeah, Opervision pointing out that this move might be good for black at some point, creating some threats and also an escape square for the black king. And now there are all sorts of threats for both players. White trying to find a mate. This looks dangerous, maybe? Okay. So is this really mate? When you take here, the king will take on e7. I don't quite see the mate. Yeah, Opervision suggesting bishop at d6. I was thinking maybe pawn at d6 and then putting the bishop on the 7th rank, because now this bishop might be hanging. So we're down to the last seconds. The Black King running towards freedom, or is it death he's facing? Looks like a6 is a perfectly safe square, and this must be a mating attack. Or the bishop is actually covering f2. Okay, but lots of checks here. Pawn here, maybe f5. Okay, the queen is cutting off. And he has two queens in hand. Yeah, that's checkmate. Wow, what a game. Did variants only have something there? Great defense by zyxon. 4-1. And once again we see the pawn sacrifice opening. The bishop check here on b5 just to disrupt the black development, blocking c6 for the knight. Black setting up a strong center here, but also that center is a bit, what to say, rigid. It's not so very flexible. And a risk for black is that this will turn into a chess game. A chess game where you're a pawn behind, or even, since your opponent has an extra pawn, you're 2 pawns behind. It's not a good idea. White is turning this into a chess game. Yeah, simply e5. Now it looks like white is clearly better here. Black lost all the compensation. He doesn't have any coordination with his pieces. This guy isn't going anywhere, and it's blocking the view for the light squared bishop. So it's actually white who gets to punch first, attacking the black king side. Simply protecting the important pawn on g7, and this threat here, rook on h8 mate, is always something you have to be careful about. You could even consider e6 here, I think. Because if you take here, you can take there with check and then just take back with the knight, and it looks so dangerous for black. Yeah, and zyxon goes for that line. This looks like it's over. So instead it takes on d3, but it's not much of an improvement. If white gets to take on f7 with check, he has ideas like knight at h8 and then another pawn on f7. Apparently, variants only missed a mating 2 in the last game. I'm not surprised, but it's not so easy to find those forced mates with only seconds on the clock. Unless, of course, you're a computer. And these guys, I'm happy to say, are only human. So maybe just knight e6 and a rook on f8 will decide this. And zyxon plays it slightly differently, threatening rook at h8. And if you take here, the queen will take back. And threatening h7 mate. And also threatening rook at h8 check. Followed by knight takes, pawn takes, and queen g7 mate. And I don't see a defense here for black. Yeah, rook h8 coming. All right, 5-1 for zyxon. Wow. Who would have thought? And the last game he just dominated. And actually it's variants only who decides to mix things up here. Going for a slightly, maybe, untheoretical line. Playing bishop g5 at the earliest point. So this will be something completely different. More of a positional struggle. Well, he caught zyxon by surprise. White being a tempo up goes for an early knight e5, which makes sense. And maybe this is sort of a trap here. Hitting h5, also looking to maybe, I don't know, take here on f6 and then take twice on d7. I'm not sure. Is this dangerous? Well, if you go to g6, white could simply take here, I suppose, because you cannot take back with a h pawn. And now maybe take here on d7, because after this you could, if you want to, try to trap the bishop. And of course also d5 is hanging. I thought it was interesting to take on d7. But this looks obviously interesting too. Wow. Now this looks like something... This looks really vicious. For instance, if you take here, pawn f7, king here, you could even maybe... Can you take on h5 with a queen? Ah, you take first on h5, of course. Threatening all sorts of nasty things. What if you take here then? Yeah, bishop f7 and then pawn h6 mate. Looking really bad for black here. Yeah, a little Swedish lesson here. Just nu is right now. And maybe the reason why you say just now in Scotland is because we visited you like 1,000 years ago and taught you some words. For instance, you say, instead of child, you say barn, right? And in Sweden we say barn for child. There are a few words, like window also, comes from the Nordic language. So black just trying to hang in there, but he has lost a piece, an entire piece, and white is just good here. White might consider giving the queen here, but we didn't see that. Instead he just calmly trades some pieces, picking up here, possibly winning another piece. This bishop doing a good job covering d2. And you can just take on h6, I think, and retreat with a knight. Or because black only has diags. Yeah, even knight at c6 looks interesting. White decides to simply replace the defending bishop with another one, and this one is also pointing towards c7. Now knight c5 looks good, hitting b7, e6. Not entirely convincing here. What about knight c2 taking a1? Did white mess this up? It looks like that. Suddenly black is back in the game. Yeah, pawn c2, because if you take here, take. This guy is completely offside. And white only has diags, so taking here, simply going this way, it's safe for black. Poor variants only. And he's caught in a mating net here. Queen here, taking here, knight on a1. He's mating just a few, I think. Because this covers b3 and this blocks the exit, and black moves in for the kill. And it's 6-1 for Zyxon. Yeah, Hercules, I wonder if you're mentioning that chess set that is on display in the British Museum. It's a very famous one. Yeah, there white was completely winning, but this is what happens when you're trailing 5-1 and you just lose your confidence and everything just goes downhill. And I'm not entirely convinced by this queen move. Sometimes white can just put a pawn here, taking the rook. Yeah, and the bishop is just retreating. And this queen will be like a stepping stone for all the white pieces getting developed. Maybe d4. threatening to put a pawn on e5, although queen at b4 might be a problem at some point. But you always have knight d2 covering c4. And if black isn't careful here, it will turn into another chess game. And that went really, really bad for him the last time. So taking on f7 unhangs the bishop on c4, also brings out the king, obviously. And even though the light squares are weak for white, there's no way for black to utilize it. Don't you play knight f4 here? Yeah, this looks really strong. Wow. Threatening the queen, threatening h3. Not looking good at all for black. Okay, so there's a threat here, but simply taking the bishop gets rid of the threat. And white has a super position here. Simply knight c3, yeah, covering e2, developing with tempo. And positionally, this is just dead lost for, yeah, a pawn on b7, and it's 1-0 pretty soon, yeah. 7-1 for zyxon, go Sweden! And now you can see that variance only, he just wants to, he's not a very happy camper. This is not as bad as it looks. If, in case you're into chess, there's a game called chess also. Giving a rook for a piece, for a light piece, is more or less an equal trade. Yeah, and apparently he plays this now and then, at least. Not a super bad opening. So, black wants some material here. But white has a nice initiative and some pressure. And you have to look out because like queen d5, you have rook at e5 check, winning the queen. Some people actually play chess. I heard that too. So do you simply play pawn f5, getting the piece back? Instead, white goes for the knight, or possibly the pawn on e4. If the queen takes here, maybe you could even play h4. So what's up with that move? Okay, so if the queen takes here, you take on c6, threatening to drop a knight on d6. Yeah, gneiss is actually a metamorphic rock. That is quite true. And in case, and if anyone wonders how to pronounce gneiss, you actually say gneiss very easily. Gneiss, gneiss, gneiss. So practice at home for the correct pronunciation. Wow. Black, getting tired of being pushed around, goes for the g2 pawn. And what's happening here? So if the bishop takes, you have knight at d3. So instead of getting the rook trapped, he trades it on e6 and then takes the queen. And now, of course, White has a great position here. And yeah, I don't think that variants only will mess this up. I would be very surprised. Now it's time, I think, to take on c6. No, it's not time, maybe. Was black actually threatening something? Not really. Knight at d3, take, and of course you don't go here, or you could even go there. Oh, never mind. So at some point take here. You can even take on h7 at some point also. Yeah, how about right away? I would like to pick up the knight on c6 first though. Maybe you do that now. Take on c6. Because it's always nice with a knight when you're attacking. But this looks like maybe a forced mate here. Taking here and just putting those double queens to work. Another queen here, maybe. And it's game over. Pawn here. And you simply take there, and it's mate on h7. So finally, variants only wins the game. It's 7-2, and this is the last game of this match. Variants only mixing it up a little bit, abandoning his precious pawn sacrifice opening and instead giving a piece in the opening. And I know this is sort of a pet line for zyxon as white. He likes to just hang on to that extra piece. Not so many white players quickly take on f6 and try to hang on to the material. But zyxon does so. And I know what he's afraid of here, zyxon. But I don't think variants only knows what to play here. Doesn't seem so. So variants only thinking a lot. I suppose d4 makes sense. Just gaining some extra space. But bear in mind that white is up a piece against the pawn. And once again, white is trying to turn this into a chess game. And that is exactly what black allowed now. This is way too passive. No pieces in hand anymore. Positionally, white is, I would say, winning here. Black gave up all his chances of compensation when he played this passive move. I don't like it. So this is more of a chess game now. And in a chess game, being a piece down is super bad. Believe it or not. So what do you do here? How do you untangle the white pieces? Yeah, put some pressure on the d4 pawn maybe. Because if you can take and then push the d pawn, maybe play bishop a3. So white picks up another pawn here. And also there's a threat of putting a pawn on e7, so not only is black down on material, white got the compensation. White making use of the fact that black doesn't have many blockers, so maybe simply pawn at d6 at some point. White picking up another pawn on b7. Yeah, whatever. Bishop t3. Oh, white just pushes forward, and winning the queen here with a knight check. And this is obviously over. It will be 8-2 for Zyxon. A very impressive win, indeed. And I think in the next round he will be facing Katask. So congratulations to my fellow Swede. Grattis Mårten. Zyxon wins 8-2. And let's see who's playing next. On Saturday we have Opperwesen versus 264 Brock. And Opperwesen got a really good start. And then on Sunday it's Katask versus Zyxon. And if you thought Zyxon was impressive in this match, I think maybe the tables will turn on Sunday. So tune in early, no, it's late in the evening, 9 p.m. And this is the end of the match. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had fun and enjoyed. Time to make a Kahoot for my students. Bye bye.